Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I plan in a series of sessions speak about Srila Prabhupada. Generally, devotees like to hear about Srila Prabhupada, but it's not going to be one of those nectar seminars. Well, Krishna consciousness is all nectar. There are 6 in Vedic, well actually it's Sankhya philosophy, there are 6 rasas in terms of taste. Sweet is one of them. It's not all sweet. So in Bhakti also, there are various kinds of nectar. So, it's become very popular in our society to have sessions where devotees come together like this, especially at camps like this, and devotees tell stories about Srila Prabhupada. This isn't going to be like that. Okay, how many photos have you taken so far? 10, okay. Now please sit down, and if you like, I'll sit here for a few minutes afterwards and make a few poses. And you can take some photos. But now, just please listen. Okay. So it's become very popular to tell stories of Srila Prabhupada, which is nice, but if this is the chief way in which devotees hear about Srila Prabhupada, it may be misrepresentative of him. Because Srila Prabhupada was always, practically throughout the day and night, speaking in a philosophical manner about Krishna. Mostly. I mean, he spent a lot of time every day dictating his purports. He would give classes, generally once or twice a day. He would meet with various people, his disciples and others, and preach to them the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. He was very concerned that devotees and others understand Krishna and the science of Krishna consciousness, as he called it, based on the term in Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavat Tattva Vijnana. He is very concerned that devotees understand the science of Krishna consciousness. And as he famously said, religion without philosophy is sentiment or fanaticism, and philosophy without religion is just dry speculation. So if we are overly concerned with hearing nice stories about how Srila Prabhupada smiled at us, or how he read our minds, or like this, then we are tending toward what Srila Prabhupada warned against, religion as sentiment. So I'm going to be speaking about Srila Prabhupada, but particularly about how to understand and how to quote Srila Prabhupada. What I'm going to be speaking on is derived from an essay by Satsvarup Das Goswami in his book Srila Prabhupada, Appreciating Srila Prabhupada. This is an essay called Properly Citing Srila Prabhupada. So I'm going to use that this essay as a base from which to, a source from which to speak. because within ISKCON, we take Srila Prabhupada very seriously. That is a prime factor of being a member of ISKCON. To date, what exactly it means to be a member of ISKCON hasn't been defined. If and when it is defined, surely the prime part of the definition must be to accept the instructions of Srila Prabhupada as our life and soul. Well, maybe not all members of ISKCON it would be at that level. You could also be a life member, for instance. And well, that's another kind of member. Many life members of ISKCON, you're maybe not familiar with the life membership program that's been mainly being conducted in India and among Indians, people of Indian extract in other countries, in which substantial donations are taken, and the enrolled members get certain benefits from doing so. So some life members, maybe many of them, are out and out Mayavadis. You don't even have to be a devotee of Krishna to be a life member, but to be a practicing member or a committed member of ISKCON, one vital characteristic must be commitment to Srila Prabhupada, accepting him as the empowered representative of Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who came to fulfill Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's, or came to enact the fulfillment, to put the fulfillment into motion. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's prediction, Priti Vite Ache Jotho Nagaradigram Shabata Prachahoy Bemoranam, that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, in every town and village of the world, my name will be broadcast, and specifically Srila Prabhupada is the founder, Acharya of ISKCON. So we often cite Srila Prabhupada. We often quote Srila Prabhupada, and a quote from Srila Prabhupada should be considered authoritative within ISKCON. That sounds axiomatic, does it not? But we do find that there are differences of opinion within our movement. In case any of you hadn't noticed, it's quite apparent. And those differences of opinion over doctrinal issues and behavioral issues, liturgical issues, some of these are technical terms, and those with different outlooks, often opposing outlooks, they generally both parties will quote Srila Prabhupada. And as it has been sometimes noted, even some of Srila Prabhupada's instructions, given in different places or in different times and circumstances or to different devotees, some of them may seem to be even contradictory. So how are we to understand all of this? To understand this is indeed vital. It's normal, and we should almost expect this after the departure of a charismatic spiritual leader, religious leader, different followers or different people who claim to be his followers. They differ over what he actually said or what is the core of his teaching. Great example of this is in Christianity, where there was much dispute, or there were many different schools arose, all claiming to represent Jesus, and eventually the Catholic, what came to be known as the Roman Catholic, or well, actually even the church came out, and the church doctrine with the Nicene Creed came to be accepted as standard, and everything else was considered heretical. Although those who considered themselves, those who are called heretics, didn't consider themselves to be heretics. They considered that those who have posed themselves as the orthodoxy, actually they are heretics. That could be a similar situation to what we find in ISKCON today, with official ISKCON guru policy and creed, as opposed to Ritvikvad. Both of which claim to be actually following Srila Prabhupada and consider the other party to be heretical, and neither of which have, in my estimation, given a very conclusive or comprehensive theological reasoning as to their position. But both of them quote Srila Prabhupada. So like this, in Christianity, the church emerged, which divided into the Orthodox churches and the Catholic Church, and later there were Protestant churches and all kinds of things. Islam has two major divisions which hate each other, Shia and Sunni. Then within the Ramanuja Sampradaya Vaishnavism, there are the Tengalai and Vadigalai. There are 18 differences of philosophy between them, and they used to hate each other. They don't anymore. Pretty much they hated each other. So like this. So it's not surprising, and not only in the not only in the religious sphere, but in the political sphere. Karl Marx was Marx and Engels were original thinkers who gave the Communist Manifesto, among other works, and there are different schools of communism arose, which considered the others to be not properly following the founder or not properly following Marx, and so it goes on and on. So it's not surprising that within ISKCON there are different groups that arise with different outlooks on what it means to follow Srila Prabhupada, and they quote Srila Prabhupada. And there may be, in future, doctrinal splits over doctrinal issues, more and more. That's almost to be expected. In fact, even the Vedas. Veda is one, but there are, please, if you'd like to take photos, I've already said, I'll sit after the class if you like, and you can take photos then. And I can do some poses and this and that photographers like. Especially this flash is a bit disturbing. I'll cite Srila Prabhupada on that. He also, he got annoyed with Bhargava once and told him to stop clicking, and then Bhargava ran out of the temple and walked the streets of Durban all night, being completely upset. Yeah, so the Veda is one, but then there are 6 schools of philosophy which came out of the Vedas, and within those schools there are sub-schools and sub-schools and sub-schools. We, in the Gauriya Vaishnava Sampradaya, within the Vedanta school of Vyasadeva, which is divided into 2, with 2 schools which are pretty much against each other, the Kevaladvaitavad of Shankara and the Vaishnava schools. And then within the schools there are various also. So it's the nature of this world that there is division. But still the basic principle in Hindu culture. Now, Hindu is not a philosophical term, but it is a broad term which is commonly used, conventionally used to cover all of Hinduism. And Hindu is one of those terms which is fairly easy to understand what it means unless you try to think about what it means. Words like mind. If you say the word mind, yeah, everyone understands what it means. But if you think about what it means, then it becomes very difficult to understand. So Hindu also. So in Hindu culture, that's broader than Vedic culture, because there are non-Vedic schools within Hinduism also. For instance, Tantra, Sahajya, and so on. A major facet is sadhu marganugamanam, as Rupa Goswami puts it in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, as one of the essential principles of bhakti, and is also an essential principle in all Vedic and non-Vedic schools, and even, and what is it, Buddhism, Jainism, all these, Sikhism, following the sadhus, the following Shastra, following tradition. And in the Vedic culture, that means following the Vedas. Other schools, as in Tantrism, they don't put much emphasis on scripture per se, but they put very much emphasis on following the guru. And usually they'll go back to some founder who they see as very important. As for instance, in the yoga school, the great emphasis is put on you have to have fidelity to Patanjali, who made the Yoga Sutras. In the Vedanta school, you have to show fidelity to the Vedanta Sutras of Vyasadeva. Vyasa is considered the guru of everyone. Guru Purnima is that is Vyasa Purnima, because Vyasa is considered the guru of everyone. And within every school, an essential principle is to follow the founder. So within ISKCON, our founder is ultimately Krishna, and then again Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or Rupa Goswami. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave the stewardship of the Gauriya Sampradaya to Rupa Goswami. Therefore, we are known among ourselves as Rupanugas. Mundane scholars, they often like to call Gauriyas as Chaitanyaites or Chaitanyites. But among ourselves, we call ourselves Rupanugas. As Rupa Goswami was given the stewardship of the Gauriya Sampradaya. and with the other Goswamis of Vrindavan to present the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we all claim to follow Rupa Goswami, and within ISKCON to follow Srila Prabhupada. Now, I've spoken a little bit here about Shastra and tradition, and this is very important in understanding Srila Prabhupada. This is one point where the Ritviks really got it wrong, the Ritvikvadis, because they like to quote Srila Prabhupada, disconnecting him from his own guru and sadhu and shastra. They say, well, if Prabhupada said this, then that's it. That overrides everything else. But Srila Prabhupada, as a typical acharya, he presented himself as a representative of the parampara. How much stress did Srila Prabhupada put on this? How many times did he stress that we have to follow the parampara? He presented his own authority as being derived from the parampara, that I don't change anything. I'm simply presenting the same matter that Krishna spoke to Brahma, Brahma spoke to Narad, Narad spoke to Vyas, Vyas spoke to Madhva, evam para param praptam imam raja shayo vidahu. Even Krishna himself, sakale neha mahata yogo nashta parantapa, saeva yang maya tedya yogo nashta parantapa, bhaktosi me sakha cheti rahasyam hete uttamam. Even Krishna himself establishes this principle, that the knowledge which I gave, Krishna being the root of all knowledge, the knowledge which I gave previously, imang vivasvate yogang proktavanaham avyayam vivasvan manave praha manur ikshvakave bravit. That knowledge which I gave to Vivasvan, the sun god, who gave it to Manu, who gave it to Ikshvaku. And in this way, in parampara, tradition, one following the other, this knowledge was passed down among the saintly kings. But in the course of mighty time, that knowledge of yoga has been lost, and therefore I'm giving it again to you. So Krishna doesn't say, hey Arjuna, I just had a great idea. It's great philosophy I just discovered. Here, listen to it. We can make Bhagavad Gita and make $1 million. No, he says it's the same thing. So, in contradistinction to what is considered progressive and advanced in the Western world, something new. Always there should be something new. But in Vedic culture, or more broadly Hindu and Indic cultures, that which is old is considered best, with the idea that that which is true, that which is established, is always true, and that there are knowers of the truth. It's not Tattvadarshi, Krishna uses that term. No, seer of the truth. Tattvavit, knower of the truth. These are terms Krishna uses in Bhagavad Gita. That there is reality, and there are persons who know that. And such persons have existed in the past. They have given their knowledge in the past. And such great persons, they are to be followed. If we think we're presenting something new, then axiomatically it's wrong. If we think we've got something better than what's already been given by the realized acharyas, then just the very thought, just the very proposition is wrong. Because truth is already given. It's not something to be discovered. Srila Prabhupada mentioned that Mohandas Gandhi, otherwise known as Mahatma Gandhi, had written his autobiography, titling it experiments with truth. But Srila Prabhupada pointed out that the very title demonstrates its disconnect with truth. Because if you think you're going to experiment with truth, the truth, that which is real, is not to be found by experimentation. It is to be that knowledge is to be received in parampara. For one has to find those who know the truth and who can impart it to us. Of course, the Vedic knowledge system, Veda means knowledge. In Croatian, Ved means knowledge or to know, is it? Slovenia, in Slovenian. Yeah, I spoke with the flight attendant on the Adria Airways flight yesterday from Moscow to Ljubljana. And I saw that he was reading a philosophy book in Slovensky. No, that's Russian language. In Slovenian. So I spoke with him a bit, and he said, yeah, Ved in our language, Ved means knowledge. So to say Veda, Vedic knowledge is a bit strange in Slovenia. So yeah, Vedic knowledge. Veda means knowledge. So what was I saying? I got off the point there. To get that Vedic knowledge, it's not just a matter of reading a book or going to a lecture in a university or passing an exam. But it requires purification to understand this knowledge. The mind has to be purified. As Srila Prabhupada writes in his purport to Bhagavad Gita chapter 4, text 34, concerning approaching a guru, one has to pass the test of the spiritual master. So there's a whole process by which one has to become a disciple. One has to undergo a transformation, because it's understood that our position in this material world is one of ignorance. That's the very reason why we're in this material world, because we are in ignorance. So we have to learn the knowledge, but it's a process of purification is required, because we can't actually understand, even if we're told all the facets of reality, which actually is not very difficult to describe it, but to understand it, to realize it, then that requires purification of consciousness. And that is why sadhana is required. That is why surrender to a guru is required. The guru is supposed to himself be on a pure platform and capable of guiding others to that pure platform also. So Prabhupada said so many things, but he did so always as a representative of the Rupanuga tradition. That should be understood. Also, if we go deeply into these matters, we may have to go very deeply, actually, to understand some points. And indeed, in Vedic exegesis is a Christian theological term, which means analysis of scripture, explanation of scripture. So in Vedic exegesis, exegesis. There is much, certain words of scripture can be very minutely studied, grammatically, contextually. Okay, going outside the Vedic tradition, here's a story, little anecdote, which represents, demonstrates how we should understand instructions in context. As I heard this anecdote, which is probably is made up, but it serves its purpose. There was a man, devout Muslim, who regularly visited his local mosque 5 times a day, Sunni. And suddenly he stopped. He didn't come anymore. So one day the imam, the local Muslim preacher or whatever, met this man and said, hey, why do you stop coming to the mosque? He said, well, I read a book about Islam, and it said one should not enter the mosque. So I stopped going. He said, show me that book. That sounds very strange. So he saw that it said, at the bottom of one page, it said one should not enter the mosque. So he turned the page and it said, without properly washing oneself. So you have to see the context. That's an example to show how you can completely misunderstand something if you don't see the context. Within the Vedanta tradition, there's been tremendous discussion over hundreds of years on the words tat tvam asi, the meaning of these 3 juxtaposed words. What does it mean actually? And there are different interpretations. Grammatically, contextually, with completely different conclusions. Shankara and his followers conclude that it means that, well, you are that, which means you are that. What is that? Well, it's Brahma, which is everything. Extreme monism, undifferentiated monism. And others, the Vaishnava acharyas, they interpret it in different ways. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu circumvented the whole thing by saying that, anyway, why are you putting so much importance on that? It's not such an important statement anyway. Shankara says this is one of the Mahavakyas, the 4 primary statements of Shastra. And Chaitanya said, no, that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is pranav, om. In citing Shastra, in citing Srila Prabhupada, there may be different understandings. They different interpretations may arise, or do arise. Those different understandings may arise. One reason may be our lack of knowledge of the broader context within which Srila Prabhupada spoke as the representative of the tradition. It may be there's this idea that, well, Srila Prabhupada came to give something. It's not exact. There is an idea that Srila Prabhupada, well, he broke with tradition. This is the Ritvik Vad idea, that Srila Prabhupada broke with tradition and stopped all. He advocated having no more initiations. This except by, they don't say that. I'm misrepresenting them. That only Srila Prabhupada should be the initiator from now on. That's the hard Ritvik line. And there's another line which another version of Ritvikism which says that, well, there could be a guru in future, but there's no one qualified now, so for now, everyone should take from Prabhupada. So a different verse, everyone should be initiated by Prabhupada. So they contend that Srila Prabhupada made to what to me appears to be absolutely no evidence whatsoever, at best something which could be misconstrued as evidence. Their main evidence seems to be that, well, so many gurus in ISKCON didn't live up to the job properly, so Prabhupada couldn't have meant them to be gurus, which is another way of interpreting. Similarly, there was a paper, a very influential paper, put out, must have been more than 15 years ago now, in which it was stated that Srila Prabhupada wanted to establish a new kind of varnashram based on preaching. This statement was given in the context of a paper which was about women's roles in ISKCON. I also wrote a book about that. And the contention is that Prabhupada jettisoned traditional culture and made a new kind of culture because he engaged his Western female disciples in many non-traditional roles, and therefore that should be the standard forever. So these, and there are others who say that, well, Srila Prabhupada wanted to establish Varnashram society, which means, and he did speak so much about traditional Indian life, so from this we may conclude that Srila Prabhupada wanted to, and he often, in graphic terms, described how modern civilization is off, wrong, bad, misguided, cats and dogs, less than animals, and so on. So Srila Prabhupada wanted to change the whole course of modern civilization and bring it closer to traditional Vedic culture, which is more conducive for practicing Krishna consciousness. So they're based on these different conceptions, devotees interpret Srila Prabhupada's words differently, and they put more emphasis on certain statements of Srila Prabhupada than others. I use the word interpret here, which Srila Prabhupada, if you read and hear Srila Prabhupada regularly, you'll know that interpret is a word which Srila Prabhupada wasn't very fond of at all. He said there's no need for interpretation. As soon as you interpret, then it's off, because the matter is clear and plain. Okay, so it's a dangerous word, interpret. But practically speaking, as the word interpret as it's used in the English language, that's what's going on at the present time between Ritvikism or Guruism or feminism, traditionalism. That's what's going on. So is this all rascaldom to interpret in various ways? Well, practically we can't avoid it. Srila Prabhupada said there's no need of interpretation because the matter is clear. okay, my interpretation of that is that this particularly pertains to Bhagavad Gita, actually it's to me it seems so clear that what Srila Prabhupada's social vision was, and I have extensively argued the case for that in the book Mothers and Masters. But others see it as, well, that's just my outlook, and there are other outlooks also. So in the absence of a clear agreement on this, then we have to say, well, that's someone's interpretation. But then when we come to interpret, then we have to study on the basis of Prabhupada's statements, and we have to see it in light of the whole tradition. So I'm going to finish now. I didn't even start this touching the essay by Satsvarup Das Goswami. There's a little background that there are different outlooks and opinions, but just as Srila Prabhupada insists that Krishna, speaking to Arjuna, had a specific message. He wanted to induce Arjuna to fight. And in the course of doing so, he also outlined the whole existential position of every jiva in this world, and their actual position and their actual duty. So he had a specific message. Although the Bhagavad Gita has been interpreted in many ways, there is a specific message. So although there are many interpretations of Krishna's message, Krishna had a specific message. He didn't indulge in a philosophical discussion with Arjuna, in the sense that, well, okay, here's what I say. What have you got to say, Arjuna? It wasn't that Krishna and Arjuna spoke as equals. Krishna, although they were accustomed to speaking as equals, as Arjuna lamented. Hey Krishna, hey Yadava, hey Saketi, I'm accustomed to speaking to you in a very familiar way, Arjuna says to Krishna. But Krishna took the role of a teacher. So similarly, Srila Prabhupada had specific messages and on specific instructions. On some philosophical points, there are differences of opinions among Srila Prabhupada's followers, especially on the issue of, did we fall from the spiritual world or not? And although it is officially banned by the GBC to think that we didn't fall from the spiritual world, there are many devotees in ISKCON who do think like that. Personally, I don't, but it is a philosophical issue, which is probably never going to be resolved to everyone's satisfaction, which is probably why Srila Prabhupada said, don't bother about it too much. You're drowning in the ocean, grab the rope that's thrown out to you and get saved. Don't think, well, is it a rope or a snake? Don't bring in some philosophy at this point. The basic premise, get out of this world. That should be adhered to. But more discussions are over various issues that, especially at the present time, over issues that affect us socially, politically, socially, the introduction of varnashram, gender roles, male, female, homosexual, all these kind of political, what is the role of the GBC, and these kind of questions, we defer to, or we refer to Srila Prabhupada's instructions. But these issues may be not so cut and dry. You know that saying, cut and dry? It means absolutely clear and demarcated as philosophical issues. When we're talking about social issues, there are dharma shastras which give guidance for how to organize society. But it's not absolutely rigid that it's not possible to give rules that cover every situation, and it's probably not desirable to even try to give rules that cover every situation and every person, because every person is a very complex being. Society is very complex, so there are guidelines. So, but what is the general direction that we may ascertain? What is the general direction, social direction, that our movement should be going in? Different devotees, they cite Srila Prabhupada, maybe citing the same quotes, and some will give more importance to some quotes than others, based on their predisposition to think what Srila Prabhupada wanted, or what they think is practical, or what will be the effect of instituting such social initiatives. So, Hare Krishna, I said I'd finish, so now I will finish. And I'll plan on continuing this. So it wasn't nectar, as traditionally known, stories of Srila Prabhupada. But these are actually very, very important issues, are they not? As we find ourselves in a time of much debate about various social issues and political issues within ISKCON, which affect us all, as we're all dedicated our lives to Krishna consciousness within Srila Prabhupada's ISKCON. So these issues have to be considered very seriously. The GBC constituted a committee called the Hermeneutics and Epistemological Committee of the GBC, which means how epistemology means how do we know, what is knowledge, how do we ascertain, and hermeneutics means methods of understanding and interpreting scripture. So I was on that committee, and other members were Hridayananda Maharaj was a member. His outlook on these issues is very different in some respects to mine. And although we had considerable, respectful and interesting discussion by email and in person over several years, we didn't come to an agreement. So these are important issues. Srila Prabhupada made everything very simple, but then when we're not so simple. So we have to, inevitably, we have to get into some complexities. Just like the teachings of Jesus, they're very simple, but they've given rise to so much